Hey, welcome to the Nomadic Millionaire Podcast, where we explore personal development, education, and entrepreneurship for digital nomads and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Ro Rizvi, and today I'm thrilled to have Jason Campbell from Mindvalley joining us. Jason is an expert in personal growth, a speaker, and a podcast host, and he's here to share his insights and experiences with us. Jason,
Awesome.
welcome to the show. We're excited to have you with
It's a
us.
pleasure to be here, Ro. Excited to share.
Yeah, it's good to connect with you. It's been a while. I think you're the epitome of the nomadic entrepreneur. You've been living all across Asia. So give us a little rundown. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your story. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think for a majority of your audience have probably also, what is it, a red pill, blue pill moment. And that probably looked in the form of a book. And that book was probably the 4 Hour Work Week. And, I got a copy of that while I was an employed person. I was working for a company that was doing real estate investments in America from a Canadian point of view. And that book came across my shelf. I started reading it. And what was very interesting is that my journey into, let's say, nomadic lifestyle was not as an entrepreneur, but was rather as an employee. And you could say, quote unquote, intrapreneur. And so I applied one of the tactics from that book, which was going to my boss to renegotiate my salary. And I remember
nice.
walking into his office and he's like, okay, what do we want to talk about? I'm saying, hey, listen, I want to talk about my salary. And mind you, early 20s, six-figure annual income. And my
Wow.
boss is looking at me and he's like, bro, you're already making a lot and you're the highest paid employee here. Like, what do you want to negotiate here? I'm like,
Yeah.
actually, I agree with you and I want to reduce my income.
Hmm.
He's like, okay, you have my attention. And I said, let's reduce my income, but allow me to work from home and I'll deliver the same results. And if we can agree to that, let's give it a shot and see where it goes. And once those terms were agreed, I first moved to Australia. Then I moved over to
Wow.
Thailand and I was able to be in a situation where my cost of living significantly went down, but my income had only reduced a little bit. And so I kind
Nice.
of did that arbitrage that's spoken about in that book and continued as an employee that was doing a lot of activities while being remotely. And, that's over a decade ago. From
Mhm.
there, I found myself trying to find an exciting kind of vehicle to take me to the next level. And I know a lot of listeners might be fans of personal growth. At the time, I was not consciously aware of personal growth. I just knew that there was this company that was doing online marketing in a really cool way. This company was Mindvalley. Found myself, visiting their office, applying for work there, got a chance to work in doing product launches for millions of dollars and putting Vishen Lakhiani, its founder, on the map as we launched him as a personal brand, helped launch his first book. I got to run the events department doing things like AFES and Mindvalley University. And one thing I would update is that I haven't been working with Mindvalley for 3 years now.
Okay.
So we actually parted ways in a great way, continued to be an author for their platform, teaching on productivity. And my
Very
biggest thing I
cool.
do now is teach about sales. And I still had a chance to be quite nomadic ever since I took that first step over a decade ago.
That's crazy, man. I mean, you were really ahead of the curve, and now it's kind of become the norm to work remotely, work from home, and have that paycheck. And that was really kind of yeah, enterprising of you to even think of that back then and ask for a pay cut. That's really interesting, you know, to be able to jump the gun on that. But so you mentioned, are you still doing the podcast, your own podcast? Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, part of the ecosystem that I've built around one of the things I've always been passionate. You might notice this as a trend through my stories, the fact that I've always had a passion for sales and I always looked at
Mhm.
creative ways of understanding what the client wants and actually presenting them an offer they can't refuse. So I think my natural an understanding in sales and paying attention to what are their needs is why I came up with an offer for my boss who's basically thinking what's my burn rate every month. If I can reduce that, they're happy. If I can get my
Yeah,
freedom, I'm happy. So speak their language and you'll get what you want.
always.
So what I've been doing now is I've published a book. The book is called Selling with Love. It was a bestseller already, and as such, I also
Nice.
have a podcast called same name, Selling with Love. I get to interview thought leaders from around the world around entrepreneurship and sales. And what I've noticed is most people who are getting into entrepreneurship or are having any struggles within their employment and don't seem to get what they want at its source has a block around sales. And most of us might be looking at it as something slimy or something manipulative. And what I'm trying to do is just educate the people that are running ethical businesses or that just want to work well to understand
Mhm.
that sales is just a tool that allows you to get what you want. And you have to speak a language that is necessary for people to understand the value you provide to them. So everything I teach and everything I do, including on that podcast, is to reinforce that point and help people get ahead.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I see that all the time. There are people with lots to offer in terms of value, but that sales part of it is such a block for many people, even though they have something valuable to offer. And helping people get over that hump is definitely a big deal, I think. With that being said, what was kind of like your own personal growth story since you've been working with Mindvalley for so many? You had been working with Mindvalley for so many years. Can you share your own self development journey and how it influenced your work at Mindvalley and beyond?
Well, I'm going to tell you something honest. When I first joined at Mindvalley, having not been exposed to personal growth that much, um, I have to say I didn't have the most of humble of ways of perceiving personal growth, and it kind of required me to be a little knocked on the head to get into it. So I remember when I first joined and I discovered some of the products that we sell. I imagine myself, early mid 20s, joining this crazy or a great organization. I think I was a little full of myself. It was like I thought I knew most of what I needed to know to be successful, and call it maybe the ignorance or blind confidence of your 20s. But um,
Exactly.
I was like, okay, I'm going to sell these personal development and personal growth products on these broken people. And thank God, such me is going to be great at marketing and put it in their hands. And I get to heal the world and help them. And if that sounds arrogant, is because it was.
Ugh.
And
A lot
quite
of us are in our 20s, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, quite frankly, there was some events that happened where I felt I was acting out of my own integrity. I've hurt some people that were close to
Mm.
me out of my own behaviors that were done very selfishly, and I realized that I needed to look at the man in the mirror and not be ashamed or embarrassed of who he was. And that's when I really started to embrace personal growth. That's when I started working on spirituality, and the things that happened when I started doing that is embracing a spiritual side, which I never considered important before. And I realized, like, wow, like we're just all a little crazy. We don't
Mm.
have the answers, and we're trying our best to figure it out. I think at the core, everyone's quite good, and no one knows more than others, and we're just trying our best. I got humbled quite strongly in the
Mm.
process, and I think that's just made me someone that can sleep better at night, have less anxiety, and just do things that I think are quite important for the world and are done in the right way. And it's become kind of the foundation of the message that I do around sales as
Mhm.
well, because I think that we have the luxury and the possibility to do things that help influence people into making decisions that could be for their higher self or their lower self. And I think
Mm.
once you start embracing personal growth and you go on that journey, you can't help but try to find a way that you can contribute in the world that allows people to make decisions that are for their higher self. And I think if more individuals are doing that and we're all raising to the best way that we can in trying to fix the problems that the world has, we're going to accelerate our path towards making the world a better place as opposed to destroying ourselves, which sometimes the news makes us feel like that's what's going on, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I mean, sometimes it really takes like a tough moment like that to really change perspectives and get yourself to the point where you're, you know, helping the world become a better place, or kind of what you're doing now through helping people find their higher, connect with their higher self and higher message. And especially nowadays with like mental health and emotional well-being being such an increasingly, important part of today's world with, all the isolation we had over the last 3 years, and people have kind of, had to retreat literally. And that kind of forces somewhat of like a revolution where people, either they quit their jobs and they like really focus on what was really fulfilling them. And have you found that in the clients you've been kind of working with, or have they, was that the start of their journey? And how has that been going?
I think it was very interesting when the lockdowns happened and everyone was forced into this isolation. You speak about these like mental health issues that definitely did come up. I don't
Mhm.
find that it's necessarily the isolation that caused the mental issues. And this again is just an opinion, but I think that we were able to delay and not face the reality of a lot of the problems that were happening when there was so much overconsumption and busyness that kept our minds not silent, always moving. We didn't need to deal with the problems when you could always escape the problems with all the opportunities and excuses that could allow that to happen. When we got put into isolation, we had to do some deep work. And like, I know so many people that made decisions in both directions. If you talk about like personal life, I've seen a lot of people break up, but I've also seen a lot of people decide to get a baby. Right.
Mm.
So you have so many of
Yeah.
these COVID babies that are coming out.
Right.
And I think it's
True.
just that the opportunity that was created from this isolation, this moment of slowing down was kind of like a forced reckoning to go back and figure out, okay, what is important for me? What is it that I need? What is working? What is not working? And I almost feel that, because this was like a global event that happened, it was able to really make us come to terms with a lot of the realities we needed to face without necessarily letting it go to a moment of snapping. The snap was the isolation. And so we
Yeah.
could do a lot of course corrections without going down the rabbit hole too far. Generalization, a bit of my own opinion, but I do
Sure.
think that coming on the other end, the people that I speak with, whether they're changing the type of employment that they're in, the industry that they're working in, learning new skills, trying to do things that are much more aligned with what they actually really want to do, I think is quite helpful. I think for a lot of the jobs that are not fun and people don't like to do, we're seeing the tools that are coming out to replace a lot of them. So if we're going to be doing something and some of the things we hated to do are being replaced, why not put our efforts into something that makes us unique, makes us stand out, and that we actually enjoy doing?
Absolutely. I think it's the best time in the world to do that now and kind of get ahead of the curve. Um, you mentioned, in that time, a lot of people retreated. And what was that like for you in Bali? And what is it like to be a digital nomad entrepreneur in Bali as a person who's lived there for the last 3 years?
Well, for someone, Joe,
Bless
excuse
you.
me.
No worries.
As someone who's lived there for 3 years, is actually considered a relatively short time to be
Mhm.
spending in Bali. So I will say, the moment I got there and the lockdown started happening and things slowed down, you could notice that there was a lot of economic activity that slowed down. For Bali
Mhm.
being an area that's very dependent on tourism, had that completely shut off. So there was a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, a lot of incomes that actually went down, and there were complete areas that were ghost towns. There was like people that were living there for longer term, a term that would be most commonly used being like expats that stayed within a certain area. And there was still a lot of economic activity that was happening there. Now, interestingly enough, I think Bali was probably one of the better places to be during the pandemic. I think the regulations were actually quite loose, and you still had the opportunity to be able to socialize. Restaurants were open, and things were quite
Mhm.
okay. It's a place that you're not stuck inside a building. You're not in elevators. There's not a lot of metal, so it's a lot of open air. So I think that naturally it just was very less contagious to see something like COVID spread
Mhm.
around. Nonetheless, it was a beautiful time. You could definitely leverage the fact that there were a lot of discounts that were available for rentals, etc. But what I found most interesting is how times are now. And
Mhm.
now being in Bali is very interesting because tourism is back in double speed. Things
Yeah.
have raised in price, and I think there's a lot of frustration that's happening right now because people got adjusted to a time that was just non-sustainable. I mean,
Mhm.
fair exchange has to be fair exchange. If you're going to be living in Bali, it's an amazing place. There's beautiful like opportunities. There's still, some opportunities for leverage and arbitrage based on the cost of living, but things are going to go up. Things are going up in
Yeah.
price around the world. So I found out the most disappointing thing is seeing how many people are just frustrated at raising prices. But I'm
Mhm.
saying, hey, no, if there's raising prices means demand's coming in, which means it should have a trickle effect to be able to support the people that had a lot of hardship during the time that everything locked down. And if you want to play a part in that economy, well, understand the rules of how it operates. Don't
Mhm.
overstep your boundaries, and hey, be grateful that you even have the opportunity to be nomadic and be in a place like Bali.
Right.
If you don't like it, there's other places to go, but I still think there's some magic to be in a place like Bali.
Absolutely. And do you still see it as like a great place for entrepreneurs to go? Like, how is it in terms of networking, community, building a business while you're there?
So there's a couple things you have to be careful for. So for one is you have to understand what are the regulations for you to work or not.
True.
You want to look at what are the proper visa vehicles that you want to have if you're going to be in Bali, and what activities can and cannot be done while you're there.
Mhm.
So I
True.
would say if you're looking to develop as an entrepreneur for the economy of Indonesia, you have to do the right working permits and you have to do a lot of that regulation, which can be done. Know that there is some levels of corruption in Bali. So whether that's good or bad, that's for the culture to decide. That's not our role to play. So understand the rules, play by the rules. Don't overstep your boundaries. I will say there's a great community of people you can have conversations with to really push yourself as an entrepreneur. So there's
Mhm.
great people that are there. I love being able to see that there's some meetups, there's masterminds, and all these types of things that happen regularly in Bali. I
Yeah.
think the most important step, or the most likely people that would get massive benefits out of going to Bali, is someone that's going through both an entrepreneurial journey and a personal journey. There's
Mm.
this like concept in Bali that we call the vortex, which is like everything just moves faster there. So if there's
Mm.
some healing or some things that you need to figure out, it seems like Bali kind of just throws it at your face pretty strongly. So
Yeah.
you will find out, you will need to go through that. And usually they say that once it's done, you get spit out of Bali.
Oh wow. Okay, that's wow. That sounds very similar to how it was in Copenhagen. Similar vibes. I was there. I was locked down there during the pandemic. So, although I will say I feel it's less business focused, less entrepreneurial than probably Bali, but which is why I'm kind of excited to check it out. And we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, yeah, it's smooth and nothing too crazy. Um, with that being said, would you have any tips for someone that's an entrepreneur is starting off, or any tips on them for selling, which is what your kind of thing is right now? Do you have any tips on that?
Well, I could take this in a few different directions, but what I would say is if you're going to be going into entrepreneurship, your first $100,000 is going to be highly influenced on your ability to sell. If you can't sell, you're not driving revenue. If you're not driving revenue, you don't have a business. Like you need paying clients to sustain a business. So I think being able to learn what are the basics of sales, if you have any hesitation around sales, I would try to find an opportunity where you can get over that fear at the most fast level possible. I
Mm,
speak to a lot of people that are successful as business people, and it seems they usually have a story about an opportunity they had to practice sales from a young age. Um,
right.
you'll hear the stories of them maybe being like door to door salespeople. I myself had telephone sales in real estate was one of my first things. If
Yeah.
looking at the story of Vishen Lakiani over at Mindvalley, he was selling technology solutions to lawyers over the phone as one of his first jobs. A
Mhm.
good friend of mine, Carl Harvey, he was selling conferences to mining industry. So I find telephone sales done in an environment that allows you to have rapid conversations with lots of leads that are coming to you allows you to get over that fear of sales. I find it the most fascinating when most people discount themselves being good at sales or bad at sales. They're just like, I'm bad at sales. I'm like, well, how
Mhm.
many sales have you done in the last, 30 days or year?
Right.
And it's like, oh, I don't know. It's like you need to have hundreds of sales calls to just get over the fear and resistance of sales before you can even measure yourself on good or bad. Right now, you're just blocked. And so,
Absolutely.
one of the number one things I would say for anybody who's just starting about entrepreneurship is try to find a sales job that
Mhm.
allows you to just rapidly speak to a lot of prospects really quickly under the dime of another company. Like that to me
True.
is the best leverage you can do. If you can go speak to their leads that they paid to bring to you, and you get to practice their sales system that they've developed that's already more mature than what you do yourself, you can
Yeah.
really get over that fear really, really fast. And to me, for someone that would be like, hey, biggest problem is I can't sell, Roger that. Let's go fix that. I'd say this is the quickest way for you to just learn the fundamentals, get over that discomfort, and then start the journey for yourself.
Hmm. Really good advice, because I think sales is one of those super underrated skills, and I think once you know how to do sales, you could pretty much go into any industry and succeed. And yeah, like you said, again, it's one of those things that does take a lot of hours of just whether it's door to door or picking up the phone, but it's invaluable, because you it really allows you to see how to relate to people, market psychology, um, and I'm sure tons of other things. You pick up a little bit of everything.
One thing I'll add to that is just, for a lot of people that I typically speak with, which have sales blocks, is we have
Hmm.
this understanding that sales is this manipulative, dark art that you use to persuade people to do what you want. And a
Yeah.
big portion of what I dedicate my book to is just opening yourself up to the possibility of actually liking sales. Because I tell people, I teach people how to sell with love, and they're like, love sales? Come on, I hate sales. I'm like, well, okay, let's do a baby step. Maybe we can
Yeah.
like sales. And I give a
Right.
lot of examples of like, every time we have a successful sales transaction, we stop labeling it as sales. It just becomes a seamless process that we enjoyed.
Hmm.
And then the only times we will use a sales label is to describe the negative times that we had interactions with salespeople. And we've mostly all had negative experiences with salespeople because we have to understand, as an unregulated industry, that oftentimes people end up in sales not by choice, but by last resort.
Hmm.
Then you're dealing with maybe a lot of unqualified salespeople. And dealing with someone that's bad at their profession doesn't throw the whole profession into being a negative thing. So,
For sure.
okay, if we can get over the fact that when you become a salesperson, you're not that slimy used car salesman or that person that, manipulated you into a bad deal in the past, although we will remember those vividly. We have to
Hmm.
recognize that so many beautiful sales happen all the time. They're seamless, and we stop labeling them as sale as soon as they're good. I mean, you're staying in
Sure.
a property. You had to make a purchase to stay in that property. We have to make a purchase to travel. Everything in the constructed world that we live in as humans is the result of a sales process. So there's a
Definitely.
lot of beauty that comes from that. So from there, I also make sure to reinforce the fact that the view about selling is not about manipulation. It's about empathy. It's about
Mm.
learning the language that is necessary for people to understand the value you want to provide to them. In the same way that if you're in Thailand and you go into a village and you start talking to people in English saying, "Oh, do you know where's the toilet?" and they look at you strange and they're not giving you what you want, you don't get frustrated. You're like, you know
No,
what?
no,
I don't speak the language. Probably if I learned the language, I could get what I want. Well,
totally.
if your business isn't creating the sales that you want, perhaps you need to revisit what language you need to speak. And that language is sales. And when you start doing it beautifully because you know what you offer is so much more than what you ask in return,
Mm.
then you get to have a successful business that gets clients that are happy to become your clients and that you can sell authentically to.
Awesome. Awesome. I really like that way of thinking of selling for sure. It creates such a shift in people and it becomes much more about connecting rather than just, like you said, trying to get them to buy something, right? So definitely a huge shift there. Um, Now, as a speaker and a podcast host yourself, what are some of the most valuable lessons or insights that you have learned from your interviews with experts and thought leaders around the world?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that's quite interesting to me. As someone who interviews a lot of sales professionals and people that are experts in their fields in sales, when I speak about my message of selling with love, and I speak of this from the beginning of it, is I'm not teaching anything new.
Mhm.
And all of the experts share quite similarly the same message. If you talk to any sales expert, they'll tell you things like you have two ears, one mouth, which means you should be listening more than speaking. And they'll be talking about caring is an important feature for a great salesperson. Understanding the impact and the difference you make to your clients is one of the key things you should be doing as a salesperson. So I'm hearing all of this advice, which reinforces these behaviors for successful sales. Yet, the message and the stereotype that still exists in the field is a very negative perception of sales. And so I'm always surprised by how much great messaging happens in sales that we're not aware of because we decide to focus on the more sensational side of sales.
Yeah.
We've seen The Wolf of Wall Street or Wall Street, and we think, oh, that's how sales happens. It's like,
Right.
yeah, if you want to go to jail, that's not where you should get your lessons on sales. You can be entertained
Exactly.
in a movie, but there's plenty of amazing messages around sales, and they're always about how do you care about the person you're selling to and making sure that they are well receiving the product that you're putting in their hands because it's worth so much more than what you're asking in return. And I think
Mm.
when you have that kind of attitude and it's being repeated by everyone that's successful in the industry, you start realizing, hey, this sales
Mhm.
thing is a good thing. I could be good at it, and that would actually make me successful in the process.
There you go. There you go. No, it's definitely, I think slowly, the concept of sales hopefully changes with the work that you're doing and the message you're putting out there. Um, is uh, is there anything that you would recommend for someone that's wanting to be an entrepreneur on their own? You said to go get a sales job. Any particular industries you might recommend, or would you recommend them to become, a lot of people are becoming coaches, especially in Bali and Copenhagen. What would you recommend for someone starting off?
So I notice a lot of people becoming coaches because they come to me.
Hmm. Yeah.
And what happens is program advertises to you, get your get your coaching certification. You'll be able to build an independent business, help people do what you love. Fantastic messaging. Great. You decide to purchase, you become a coach. You graduated from the class, you have your certificate, you are now a coach, but you need clients.
Yeah.
And what happens is there's a lot of coaches that come out in the industry and they are very unprepared about what are the realities of running the business of coaching. See, coaching as a skill is a great skill to have, but the business of running a coaching enterprise is a different set of skills. And
Totally.
so, yeah, there is a gap to be filled. I try to support a lot of people that are becoming coaches to get their first success. It requires a lot of effort around prospecting. It requires a lot of effort around content creation. You need to get comfortable. You need to craft an offer. There's a
Mm.
few elements that needs to be put in place for you to have success as a coach, that are very well related to direct sales. And so, yeah, if you're going to be getting some practice before going into coaching, one of the things I might say is if there's an opportunity for you to be a salesperson for a coaching organization, you'll probably learn a lot there. And I find that most of these organizations are starving to find salespeople to sell their coaching programs. And
Mm.
so I find it interesting how many coaches are out there, but how many are not salespeople for coaching organizations. If you can find an enterprise that would hire you to do that, not only would you get your practice to make coaching sales under an umbrella of a brand that's already established, you're also going to get to peek at how they built their systems, get to learn in the process. So yeah, and it's interesting because most people don't like say leave the job and become an entrepreneur. And I
Yeah.
look at my own success and the leverage that I've had has always been through working within organizations. But
Right.
you don't want to go work in organizations with this employee mindset. I found it very interesting. Just recently, I had my old boss reach out to me. I don't
Mm.
even know why. It might have been just to wish. Oh, it was to wish me happy birthday.
Nice.
My old boss in real estate wishes me happy birthday, and they sent me a message, and they're like, you know what? One of the most you're like one of the most interesting and unique hires I've ever had
Mm.
because I had no idea what you were doing, but you drove me revenue. And I've never
Wow.
had an employee that I hired, which I told them nothing. They just went out there and drove revenue for me. And if
Wow.
you are
Mm.
someone that's constantly being focused on driving revenue for your employer, you're always going to be hired no matter where you go. I would probably say that
For
Vishen more than
sure.
likely would have a similar opinion when it comes to
Yeah.
my time at
Yeah.
Mindvalley, because I remember
Absolutely.
they never had subscription programs at the time, and I was like, hey, I need recurring revenue so I can build a team and have some payrolls be covered by this recurring revenue. So I
Yeah.
launched a program without them knowing what that program was, and then they're
Wow.
like, whoa, look at this monthly income, that's amazing.
all, all of a sudden the lifetime value shoots up and they're
Right?
like, what's
So
going on?
it differs a bit from your question, but yeah, if you can,
Mm.
if you're focused on learning some of the sales, the biggest thing I would say is if you can find an organization that you can leverage your training and be paid for it, that's
Mm.
awesome. If you want to go at it by yourself, you can do that too, and plenty of them do. I'm a big fan of Rich Litvin that I've interviewed on my show as well. He just says like,
Mm.
hey, if you're always focused on creating and serving, you're going to build up, you're going to learn, and it's going to be a path that will put you on the right path. So create
Mm.
things that provide value and serve people all the time, then you're on the path. That, and it
You're
takes
going.
time. You got to be patient.
For sure, for sure. Now, what if you have a successful product, you have sales coming in? How do you see a person scaling that? What's your advice on maybe hiring a team, getting like a call center? Like, how would you do that?
Yeah. Well, it's a it depends, obviously, but if I could think of some basic things, is if you've passed that $100,000 mark, right? Then
Mhm.
like you've at least nailed an offer that converts. You probably have some clients that are happy. If you have like that, that would be the recipe you need before you even think about scaling. Is like, are the people really happy and referring you from the moment that they've made their purchase? And if that's the
Mhm.
case, then okay, maybe now we could impact more lives. It always come back to, maximizing traffic and conversion. And I'm sure you're familiar with digital marketers products, and
Yeah,
conferences are called that way because at
exactly.
the end of the day, that's everything that happens in your sales system. Is you got to build some traffic, people that find out what you are, who you are, and then converting them into a lead or converting them into a client. And so
Mhm.
there's many ways you can do strategies around that. But if you have that offer really well nailed and that you've already gotten a lot of clients that are happy, then yeah, you
Mhm.
start experimenting. Okay, I'll tell you something I find interesting is some
Yeah,
people are like, yeah, I close 80% of the people I speak to. I'm like, well, you must not be speaking to a lot of people, or your
yeah.
system must filter out that only the most qualified people you have conversations with. And that's a business model choice, right? So there's
Mhm.
nothing good or bad about that. But if you're not, I wouldn't advertise that as a target to hit. Instead, maybe you want to drive more traffic if growth is the next thing that you want. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
are you doing the content marketing? Are you launching a podcast? Are you doing the TikTok? Are you doing the YouTube? You're not,
Right.
I wouldn't say go out and do everything, but you try to figure out, well, where are my people hanging out and how can I get in front of them? And then if you
Mhm.
can get more traffic, then guess what? You can see your conversion metrics. There's like a stage in business from the
Yeah.
100 to the million that ends up being a little more boring and less creative because you now start being a lot more data focused. You have to start
Mhm.
measuring things. You have to start doing things that are repeatable so you can improve upon them. And when you
Mhm.
start getting into that zone, that's really when you start probably working with agencies, probably seeing where you can leverage, other people on your team, whether you want to build it internally or with partners. I'm
Mhm.
someone who prefers agencies just because I
Okay.
think there's a lot more you can turn it on and off based on where you're at in the cycle of your business. But there's
Right.
some intelligent people using incredible tools that can support you on the next stage. And if you're sitting on cash reserves and you're ready to take it to the next level, start having conversations.
Why not, right? It's the right time to move for sure. You mentioned social media, TikTok and whatnot. Where do you see marketing going in terms of social media in 2023 and beyond? And are you incorporating AI into your marketing? I know that's like the buzzword these days, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's talking about ChatGPT, AI, crazy. Like the amount of acceleration around the little tasks that need to be done is creating this. The barrier to entry to being out there and promoting great content is becoming so low. Like one of my
Yeah.
friends just built this platform that allows you to create 200 SEO optimized articles a month
Huh.
and published 200 a month. And the whole system is like, hey, imagine this: you have 200 AI generated articles, and Google loves AI generated articles because
Really?
what is
Okay.
Google's mission is to organize the world's information. If they would ban AI content, they'd be going against their core value, which is about organizing world's information. So they even have it in their policy saying, hey, if the AI generated content allows people to find the right information easier and it's better written than what's available, we'll rank it.
Oh,
So
wow.
imagine the
Mm.
system where you're pumping out 200 articles in your niche every single month, and then some of them start ranking on Google. Then you bring in your professional writers and you start tweaking it to make sure it's really perfect. And then you start
Mhm.
being able to dominate the SEO game. Yeah, you can't
Wow.
choose. You need to use the AI because you cannot compete with that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
And
no way.
so there's the one thing, which is if you can leverage AI to accelerate the production of what you create as content, it will be necessary. The second thing is you got to shine and bring your uniqueness because, I was having a conversation with Ken Honda, and
Mhm.
he wrote a book called Happy Money, and he's a great man when it comes to understanding the philosophy and flow of money, which is not like learn these specific stocks. He's like, no, if you're developing invisible assets, which are building the community, helping others and having that trust that others have in you because you always show up, that's going to be one of the best assets you can develop.
Mm.
Anybody can create this 200 article engine for SEO, but why would someone choose to visit one of those blogs versus the other is going to be the connection that they have with you. So
Mm.
I would say it's going to become even more important to show up as yourself publicly so that people can earn the trust from you, be authentic, stand out by just being who you are. And so
Mhm.
put a lot more of that out there. If you're trying to just fit the mold and not stand out and trying to fit the cookie cutter is going to be AI. So you need to be the weird one.
Yeah, that's true. You got to bring the creative edge. It's not, doesn't come standard anymore. But awesome. No, that's really interesting that you mentioned that Google is actually allowing AI content from, because I know they can detect it now, but I wasn't aware that they're actually okay with it. But it does go along with their ethos.
Mm-hmm. They just wish you were using their AI, but they're working
Right,
on it.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
they definitely have a chip on their shoulder now, so they're definitely coming.
Yeah. So no, it's really
Yeah.
interesting because it's going to shift the marketplace. And what I find most beautiful about that is for any entrepreneur that might not have English as a first language or the mastery of the English language, copy was a huge roadblock for a lot of these creators. And the fact that AI exists now to be able to allow you to write in a way that at least you check all the boxes when you come
Right.
to having that website out, having that standard content out, is just going to open up the marketplace for a lot more people to be able to stand out, share their message in their unique way. And I think,
Hmm.
we have to stop trying to be like, I'll be the best of this. Focus on a small group of people that you can really serve and serve them well. And you can probably design a lifestyle that's going to be amazing by just doing that.
Wow. That's really awesome. I like that. I'd like to ask you also, are there any upcoming projects that you're working on? I know you told me a little bit about a more hobby, like or more physical hobby. That I think you're doing a race soon. But any of that plus any other projects coming up
Yeah.
for yourself?
Well, there's a couple of things, and since we're in this category of AI, I think there's an
Hmm.
exciting project that I've parked it for now because it's a shiny object, but it's a really interesting one nonetheless. Is I was able to combine a few of these AI tools to, number one, create these generated scripts for amazing video lessons around aspects of sales. Roger that. I
Nice.
digitized my voice where you can sound exactly like me while reading those scripts by an AI. Check. And now
Nice.
we've been able to create a video that is of my face that is speaking those scripts that were generated using my voice. And so one of the things we're
Wow.
planning on doing is creating a fully AI generated course that teaches you the A to Z of sales. And I
Hmm.
might not be involved with the project. My team member might create the whole thing himself by just
Nice.
using the right prompts, creating the right tools, and creating what would be the best course on sales, from closing to prospecting to follow up, and including all of the best that exists out there into a
Hmm.
course that is fully AI generated. And so
Wow.
that's what's kind of coming out
That's
on the
wild.
first phase. If I'm thinking about longer term, one of the projects that we're thinking about is, well, what does it look like in the future when you can use AI to replicate this face, this voice? The only thing that will be left is the personal brand and the reputation that it has. And so
Hmm.
one of the things for me that I find is most important to leverage in is, how do I manage the Jason Marc Campbell brand? Because if I can go say to um, let's say I go to Ferrari, and Ferrari wants to create a automated sales force that is on the computer, that is authentic, operates from a place of love, and moves Ferraris for them. Well, what if they can license the Jason Marc Campbell salesperson that is an AI salesperson that you can have a Zoom call with, can talk to you about Ferraris, and has certain values? Then you can actually start licensing your brand for organizations to use you as their avatar to be able to sell on your behalf. And if they have a certified with selling with love kind of stamp to them, and they know if you go to that place and you're like, yeah, you know what, I love shopping on that channel because they're selling with love certified, that's where my mind is going for what would need to be created in this world of AI.
Wow, that's incredible. How far away do you think that is? At
Two
least
years
2 years, yeah. Wow,
It's
wow.
moving so fast, man. And I don't think it's moving, like, it's going to start moving even faster. Like,
Right.
I'm just looking at all the software. Like, my friend who's not a developer at all built the most amazing software because you can
Yeah.
have it AI generated. So, listen,
Wow.
things are going to get faster. And I would say the biggest things you want to do is operate with authenticity,
Mhm.
understand your reputation, go and provide value and care for people. That's why I'm seeing my selling with love message is going to start resonating even more, because if you're not, you're going to be eliminated. Like, if you're not acting in integrity, you won't exist in the marketplace, which is one of the key missions that I have within why I've created what I've created. Is I want to see a
Mhm.
world where there's no douchebag marketers and salespeople. And if I
Yeah.
can teach the ethical businesses to sell and market with integrity and show how they can acquire customers and make sure to deliver more value, then the
Mhm.
whole world wins. And I think once you start
Absolutely.
getting clear on the things you stand for and the things you stand against, you're going to be able to attract the people and have success in this marketplace.
Totally. No, I totally get that. I mean, it would definitely, it seems like if you can license something like that, like even though it's artificial in the name of artificial intelligence, if you could get it to be authentic and license that out, I mean, at scale, that kind of changes the game for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely, and yeah, things are moving crazy fast for sure. I mean, you have Mid Journey, you have just yeah, so much happening in this space. Um, Now, I would like to touch on real quick any habits or routines that you've adopted that have had a significant impact on your personal and professional life.
Yeah. So some of the key things that I have as rituals. Well, for one, I went through a process while I was at Mindvalley from one of their products called Lifebook, and it's a
Mm.
beautiful process to evaluate
Yeah,
every area of
perfect.
your life. So I have this book that's basically defined my beliefs, visions, and why that's important to me in every area. And I've built
Mhm.
strategies for each of these areas to bring me closer to what my desired goal is, to live the life that I want. You know, being nomadic and having freedom was one of them, and I get to live it now as I'm traveling and getting to record amazing content, having conversations with you.
For sure, for sure.
Those are already things that are going well. You know,
Yeah.
um, with that, I have a group of guys. So we're three guys, and every
Mhm.
week we talk, we
Nice.
set goals. And I think, and I'll speak specifically for brotherhood here. So
Yeah.
I just find that it's really, really good to have two other or three other men that I highly respect, that I can have conversations with, and we can challenge each other, push each other.
Mhm.
I'm sure it applies for any gender, but that's what's been working for me. And I thought it was very specific to have that masculine energy where, we really, call each other out and make sure that our best comes out. And that's just been an accelerator. We've been talking for 5 years every week,
Wow.
pushing
Wow.
ourselves. And it's been amazing to see how we all shifted jobs. We all started living in different places. And it's been
Yeah.
incredible to witness ourselves grow with that kind of habit in place. So I think having a core group like that is very, very important. Um,
Mhm.
and I'll share one of the ones that I shared with you before the call, which is health and
Yeah.
fitness is an important metric for me. And I
Mhm.
I decided that the easiest way to stay in shape is to sign up to a crazy obstacle course race. So I'm doing a
Right.
Spartan race once a year at least, and that's kind of like a check mark, because if I don't want to die on a Spartan race, well, I need to train and stay in shape. And so that's kind of like my
Sure.
one thing that I need to do. And if I do that, my health takes care of itself.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a great motivator, right? I mean, there's lots
Survival.
of plenty of incentive there to get in shape for sure. I'm curious, how did you get this group together? This you mentioned brotherhood. Did you guys already were you friends and then you decided, hey, let's do this together? Were you all kind of starting off at the same place, or were you already entrepreneurs? Or,
Well, the story is actually quite interesting. So I was working at Mindvalley, and they were doing a workshop for Lifebook. It was kind of like a Lifebook facilitation that was happening in the
Mhm.
office. And I could see where the speaker was sharing, like we had just set some goals, and I was like, oh, he's probably going to put us in groups.
Yeah.
And I was a leader at Mindvalley, and so I knew that there
Mhm.
were probably a lot of people that were going to come and ask if they wanted to be in a group with me. But I
Yeah.
started thinking about, well, who are the other people that are intimidating to me,
Hmm.
that are like, I don't work with them, I don't know them that much, but I respect that they are high quality men.
Mhm.
And I picked the guy who was the head of operations, the COO. I picked the
Mhm.
guy that was the CTO, and the guy that was the head of HR. And I just messaged them even before, and I said, hey guys, I feel like they're about to put us in groups, and I actually respect you a lot. And I think I'd love to do an accountability group with you. And so we all
Nice.
got together before they announced it. And the moment they announced that we're getting in groups, we're all like, well, all four of us get together, and everyone's like, oh, they already grouped up.
Yeah.
And to me, that was very interesting, because again, it wasn't the people that I was the friendliest with. It wasn't the people I was close to. It was people that I respected. And I think that's a different type of person. And if you look into your life and the people around you, there's probably some people that you highly respect. They weren't
Mhm.
necessarily like, they weren't mentors, which I think are people that are several steps ahead of you. It would be a bit more difficult to be accountable with them, because there's so
Sure.
many steps ahead. They just wouldn't have that same equal amount of respect to you. But
Mhm.
finding other people that had a bit of the same values, a bit of the same drive, and they were of high integrity, that became, what was the foundation of this group. And every other group that was formed in that batch of students, I think, have
Mhm.
dissolved, and ours, I believe, is the only one that remains.
Wow, that's saying something.
Yeah.
Goes to show you that that's incredible. I like that. Like choosing people to work with based on respect rather than you just learn so much from other people that you have a genuine respect for sure. And with that being said, if you could just wrapping up, would you be able to share like a transformative experience or encounter that maybe you haven't discussed publicly before, which significantly impacted your personal development or professional journey?
Well, I'll share one that's funny
Yeah, sure.
and actually quite practical. So I had this opportunity. I met somebody while I was traveling in Japan. We had a dinner and we met a few people. And this one lady, she was a style coach. Never paid attention to stuff like that. And then eventually I saw that she was hosting an event and she invited me to come speak at her event in Tokyo. And so, considering the traveling and everything, I just mentioned, well, if you want me to come speak, my fee is $10,000. And she did
Mhm.
something very interesting. She said, well, I can't afford paying your speaker fee, but I'm a style coach and I usually charge 10,000 for my style coaching. So, would you be open to actually coming to speak at my event? And I'm actually going to give you my style coaching experience in exchange.
Uh,
I was like, okay, that can't hurt. Let's try it. So I decided to fly to Japan. I went to do a talk at her event. And so, first thing that I think is very interesting from that is the power of bartering to be able to
yeah.
get even more value exchange and flowing, I think is a powerful thing, especially at the beginning stages. And
Hmm.
so, when that happened, I did the talk. It was a very small talk, and I was glad to do it. It was just a free talk that I was able to get a trip to Japan for. So, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Um, Following that, I actually went on an experience to do stock coaching with her. And I thought it was so interesting to have someone that decided to pay attention to how you look and how
Mhm.
does that translate to how people perceive you in the world. And I realized that it's something to pay attention to and how it changes the people's perception of you in a more powerful way than I ever expected. And so by going through that, it was, a bit of a hair, makeup, styling, photo shoot,
Yeah.
posting
Right.
that. I remember just places I would go talk when I'd go into the office, people just like treated me differently. And I found that fascinating. And, as much as I would, first label that as, wow, that's a bit superficial. I'm like, no, that's just how the world is. We
Yeah.
have to make quick judgments. There's so much information coming at us. So we will make quick judgments based on how people take care of themselves. And I think
Totally.
that was a very interesting lesson, is just like how you take care of yourself reflects on how
Hmm.
people treat you as well, whether that's your physical look, your mental health, and just in any way that you provide value. If you pay attention to that, I think people notice, and then they'll know that if they become your client, you'll pay attention to them too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's excellent advice. Well, thank you so much, Jason, for joining us today. It's been really a pleasure to have you on the show and connect with you after so long. And yeah, we've definitely learned a lot from your insights and experiences.
Thank you so much for having me, Ro.
Absolutely, absolutely. For our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Jason Campbell, be sure to check him out on his socials, follow him on social media. If you want to plug that in, any websites, or where can they find you, Jason?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing you can do is either search for Selling with Love. That is what I'm all about. You'll see more about me there. And jasonmarkcampbell.com is the website. So if you find that as well, come and send me a message. I love hearing from people that have listened to me on a podcast. I usually give about a lot of free products for people that message me on LinkedIn. So I'd say if you come to LinkedIn, you connect with me, add a note, say you heard me on this podcast, I might have a couple freebies to send your way. So I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome, awesome. I appreciate that. And yeah, with that, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the Nomadic Millionaire Podcast. See you guys.